30, this is when we start. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 1 to 4 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal within 150 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 210 days for an official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comments on these amendments. Now I'm going to take us in a different direction. Today's a very special day, so I'm heading over to the podium, in case you're interested. So, as I said, today's a very special day, and we're going to be taking a few minutes to recognize an important milestone, one that's very much related to the work we do at this committee, at the Planning Committee. We have with us today representatives from the Canadian Institute of Planners. The Institute is the voice of Canada's planning community, and it's about to celebrate its 100th anniversary later this month, in fact on May the 31st. As you can see, Mayor Watson, well, you can't see because he's sitting down, but if you could see him, he's here. He's joined us today, and he's going to speak more about the Institute and the role it plays in the growth of our city. But before I turn over the floor as chair of the Planning Committee, I do want to say how particularly pleased I am to have this opportunity here at today's Planning Committee. As you might be able to tell from the full gallery, many of the city's planning staff have joined us this morning. We only get to work with a handful at each of our planning committee meetings of our professional planners, but we're very fortunate to have access to their expertise. But it's really rare to get the opportunity to speak to such a large number of you from this incredible team. And so while you're all here, I'd like to take the opportunity to, on behalf of the members of this committee, to say thank you. Thank you for your thoughtful work you put in and for the valuable service you provide for us as we consider the files that come before us. Planning regulations can sometimes be arcane and complex, but your continued guidance is critical to our understanding. You're always prepared to answer questions about every detail of a project and to clarify the information we need to make our decisions. You are an important resource, and frankly, we rely on you. So thank you very much. As I understand, we have 86 members of the Canadian Institute of Planners on staff here at the city. So there's clearly a major crossover between the work that we do and the service of the Institute provides as a voice for Canada's planning community. With that, I'm going to invite Mayor Watson up. He's going to give you more details.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Harder and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs. Thank you for being here as we celebrate this milestone, the 100th anniversary of the Canadian Institute of Planners. As Jan mentioned, you play an important role because often politicians are involved at the end of the process when we're opening a subdivision or an area, but all of the heavy lifting has been done by our professional staff that give us, as members of council, the ability to make informed decisions. And there's an incredible effort that goes into any city building project well before it ever gets to the committee stage. But it's often at Planning Committee, which is really the workhorse committee of council that meets the most often, has the longest meetings, where the professional advice of the planners that do work for the city and others come to bear. You're an important partner, ensuring we have knowledgeable, experienced professional planners to do that early groundwork. Vous êtes un partenariat très important qui nous permet d'avoir des urbanistes professionnels informés pour effectuer tout ce travail préparatoire. I'd like to recognize Beth McMahon, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Institute of Planners and our neighbor just across the street, members of the Planning Committee, Steve Willis, and of course our city planners, many of whom are here with us today. And addressing the use of land, resources, facilities, and services is really a complex task. And I often say there are a lot of professional transit experts and planning experts that call into talk radio a lot. We hear a lot from people who have different opinions, but we have to, on important issues, rely on our professional planners. We welcome the input from the public, but at the end of the day, our decisions have to be defendable before they would leave this building to be challenged. So it's no small endeavor, and the Institute has been around since 1919 and has provided a voice for the professional planners we rely on each and every meeting of the Planning Committee. And that's no small endeavor. They now count membership of more than 7,000 planning professionals across Canada, including about 300 right here in Ottawa. And we benefit directly as the Institute ensures its members maintain a high level of excellence and expertise. Nous en profitons directement car l'Institut veille à ce que ses membres maintenant un très haut niveau d'excellence et d'expérience. And the Institute promotes professional development in fields as diverse as land use and transportation planning, environmental resource management, heritage conservation, social planning, and economic development. And that means the City of Ottawa has access to the most talented planners in the country, many of whom sit with us in the gallery today. So together, the Institute and its members help to keep the city growing physically, economically, and with an eye on protecting our shared environment and built heritage. The City of Ottawa congratulates the Canadian Institute of Planners, and we thank its members and leaderships for working tirelessly to safeguard our urban and rural centres. And I'd like to invite Ms. McMahon to come forward. Maybe we'll get all members of council who are here to present a proclamation right behind me. Come on up here. It's my pleasure. Come on, we'll do a little group shot here. It's my pleasure to officially proclaim Canadian Institute of Planners Day, May 21st, 2019. Oh, May 31st. Sorry, I just had eye surgery. I can't read.
Me too?
Is it May 31st?
Yes, it is May 31st.
May 31st. So I was off by 10 days.
And does it say there that actually the Institute was founded here in the city of Ottawa?
Well, let me just get back to you on that.
It doesn't, but that's why I put it in like that.
I'm not sure, but we
me
can
to read
amend it.
Have you finished reading it
Yeah,
all?
yeah, we'll just do the proclamation because it's all. So thank you, congratulations, and we'll just maybe gather around here, and Chris, our photographer.
Maybe we could get in front of the podium.
Sure, all right.
Okay? Yeah, sure. And then I'm going to ask you to say a few words. Sure. Well, you know what? Since we're doing this, because I'm going to ask everybody.
Oh my God. Come on, I was tired. I was having a little sleep. Still jet lagged. You have the best excuse.
Stand in the front.
Quite a few of us, isn't there?
Maybe like the top of some foreheads.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Who? He's not on this committee unless he. Well, then, I don't know that he is. Yes, I am going to. Yes. All right. Thank you, Mayor Watson. Can I have everyone's attention again? I know that was a lot of fun. More fun than we usually have here. Thank you. So now Ms. McMahon is going to say a few words.
Thank you so much. This has been a great honor and privilege to be here with you today, to bring, I guess, some smiles. It felt like an Ellen moment. We should be doing a big group selfie. But quite honestly, like, we take this very seriously. There's been years of work leading up to our centenary year, and the very idea of declarations came from our membership. We have a very active and engaged membership, and many of the planners on staff are also very dedicated volunteers with our own organization and with our sister charitable organization, the Planning Student Trust Fund. And we're so appreciative. All of the work that's now being put into the upcoming conference would not be possible without the support of our members and planners, the City of Ottawa. And so I just want to mention that. And then, as Chair Harder was mentioning, the inaugural meeting of the Canadian Institute of Planners actually took place at the Chateau Laurier, May 31st, 1919, when there was then 13 founding members, and the population of Ottawa was about 100,000 people. So now to think, 100 years later, you're at a million, we're at 7,000. I can't help but think about how we've grown together and continue to grow this great city with the work of planners. So thank you so much for having us here today. Thank you, Chair Harder. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mayor.
So just before we get back to the Planning Committee agenda, I want to point out that there's an exhibit of photos and planning documents outside the Champlain room. I take it it's that way? Yes. Yeah? I came in this door, so I'm not sure. But we'd like to offer a big thanks to the City of Ottawa Archives for their hard work putting together the display, which explores how the vision for Ottawa has evolved over the years. And the historic documents and photos show a fraction of the work professional planners have been involved in Ottawa for many, many years, well, 100 years. It will only be in place for a few days, so I encourage you to visit after Planning Committee to see how planners have helped shape the Ottawa of today and continue to. I mean, we're starting the official plan. It's the most important, I think, it's the most important piece of work that we will do in this term of council. It's important we get it right. We're starting from a blank slate, really. We're not building on what we had before, but we won't throw out the baby with the bathwater. But all of you will be playing such an important part at this point in Ottawa's time for the future of Ottawa. So I thank you for that. That's it. That's it. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that it's also a perfect day. It's the second last day before Mr. Smith, one of the best planners I certainly have had the pleasure to work with and know, and just a great guy. And I know many of you would say the same thing if you were sitting up here. But tomorrow is his final day as an employee of the City of Ottawa. 34 years. I find it amazing just to think about the amount of time and the amount of input that he's provided, and people who have worked for this city for that length of time, how much it's involved. And he was with the original City of Ottawa, so of course, as you know, I didn't come here willingly. I came from Nepean, and we wanted no part of Ottawa ever. We've kind of grown from that, so it's our relationship has evolved over the time too. But we had a party for John at his horticultural building at Lansdowne on Friday afternoon. A lot of friends came together in John's family, and every single person that talked, and who talked was Mr. Moser, Doug James, Alain, are you still here? Alain Miguelas, Steve Willis, of course, and myself. Every person talked about John Smith Speak and how he manages to put 350 words into one sentence and speaks it and says it so quickly that you know that he said something important, but there's not a follow-up question to make, because it's going to take you probably 24 hours to decipher what it was he actually said to you. So as I said on Friday, I know very well, I've always known that, you know, as have others that have been exceptional people here at the city, will have continued to be exceptional contributors to our city, but through a different way. And I know that you'll be back here in this chamber someday with a client that you're working with on a big project for this city, John, and I just want to tell you that the 5-minute rule will apply. So thank you very much. John, if you want to say a few words, this is probably the time to do it. Or not, you could save it, I could tack it on to your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call you Jan, Madam Chair, because to me you are Jan, and I really appreciate the very kind comments and sentiments. I've really enjoyed my 34 years with the former City of Ottawa, with the current City of Ottawa, and as I mentioned on Friday when I gave my little response speech to the incredible accolades that were given to me by those that spoke, and as I mentioned to a number of people, it's amazing to hear people reflect your career back at you. I mean, you see it through a certain lens, which is a certain perspective, but to hear that come back through the perspective of others that you've worked with, that have been very much a part of your career, that have helped you achieve the goals and the aspirations that you had set for yourself way back when is truly remarkable and incredibly heartwarming. I've had a fantastic ride. I've really enjoyed sort of being in the public sector. Really enjoyed working with numerous planning committees, numerous councils. This planning committee, this council, absolutely no exception. You all have phenomenal work that you have in front of you, but the one thing that I do have to say is that the incredible support that's being provided by the politicians to those of us that appear to you on a regular basis with our recommendations, and yes, we'll get challenged from time to time, and yes, you might try to put us in certain places, but at the end of the day, as I mentioned on Friday, the game of city building is a collective effort. It's not just one person, it's a bunch of people coming together with a very common aspiration to help Ottawa, this city of ours, that we love and cherish, to be the best that it possibly can be, and to set the stage is not just setting the stage for us and how we live our lives here, that's a big part of it, but is looking to the future and making sure that we put in place the right pieces so that in fact our kids and our kids' kids can inherit a city that they can be as proud of or prouder of than we have been. So it's been an incredible journey. I've really enjoyed my time, and I definitely do plan to participate in the city building game on the other side of the fence, and we'll see about this 5-minute rule, Jan, whether or not we stick to it or not. But anyways, thank you, and thank you for everybody that's been here today. Really very much appreciate. Lots of well wishes, and like I said, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Okay, so anyone that's not here for business, you can go back to your desk. Get that whip out, Mr. Willis. Thanks, everyone. It was great having you here today. Okay, so we'll get to the agenda now. I do have regrets. I have lots of regrets, but in regard to it's just like. With regard to the meeting, however, Councillor Brockington is in Toronto today at an emergency AMO meeting, so he sends his regrets. He's away on city business. Councillor Moffat had intended to be here. He got as far as Barrhaven, but he is not going to be able to join us, and that's health issues. And so any declarations of interest from those of us that are left? No? Confirmation of minutes from the May 9th meeting, 2019, carried. Okay, the first item, zoning bylaw amendment, cannabis production facility. We have a, oh, we don't? Oh, okay. Well, we did have some correspondence, and we were going to have a speaker from the Urban Edge Farm. I'm sure you all read the submission that we received earlier this week. Does anyone need to hold this item, or is it carried? Carried. Thank you. Item number 2, we're holding for a presentation, and we have speakers. Item number 3 is zoning bylaw amendment in Councillor Gower's ward, 5615 and 5621 Fernbank Road. If needed, we have Taylor Marquis from the regional group and Ellen Potts from Novatech. Are you? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for them on the item at 5615 and 5621 Fernbank Road? No? And so you don't need to speak? Thank you very much. So is this item carried? Thank you. Oh, I know what I forgot to do. We do have, it doesn't really matter, I can do it right now. Councillor, Vice Chair Tierney has a motion to add an item. No.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Whereas the Ontario Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing introduced Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice Act 2019, for reading on May 2nd, 2019, requested public comments by submission by June 1st, 2019, and whereas the General Manager of Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development has notified the Minister that the City of Ottawa will submit its comments after they are endorsed by the City of Ottawa Council, and whereas staff have reviewed the proposed legislation to provide Council with the information needed to give constructive feedback and has written a report for Council's consideration, whereas Council is scheduled to meet on June 12, 2019, whereas considering this matter at today's Planning Committee meeting would allow time for the review, comment, and potential revisions prior to consideration by Council on June 12th. Therefore, be resolved that Planning Committee approve the additional report to the agenda for consideration by committee at the May 23rd, 2019 meeting pursuant to Section 89.3 of the procedural bylaw.
Is that carried? Yes? Show that shaking of heads means carried. Thank you. Okay, and the fourth item we have is the zoning bylaw amendment, 1850 Walkley Road. We don't have any, we're not having a presentation. The only speaker we have is Jonah Bond from Holtzman Consultants. Jonah, do you need to speak if we don't have questions? Okay, does anyone have questions? Okay, thank you for coming. Is this item carried? Carried. Good, thank you. So we're going back to our only held item, which is the zoning bylaw amendment at 383 Albert Street and 340 Queen Street. And we are, like I said, we are having a presentation, and we have Mr. James and Ms. O'Connor.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Ann O'Connor will just give a brief presentation for the committee on the project. There you go.
Hello. All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of committee. My name is Ann O'Connor, and I'm the file lead planner for the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Claridge at 383 Albert and 340 Queen Street. The applications were submitted to facilitate the redevelopment of the site to permit two 27-story apartment buildings with ground floor commercial and a parking garage. The subject property is located in the central area and is an L-shaped lot with frontage on three streets: Queen Street to the north, Line Street to the east, and Albert Street to the south. The site is just under 4,000 square meters in area and is currently occupied primarily by a surface parking lot. There is also a two-story mixed-use building fronting on Queen Street, as well as the Lion LRT station located at the corner of Lion and Queen. The surrounding area includes a mix of uses in a predominantly high-rise built form. Directly west of the property is a 13-story condominium development. In May 2011, the Ontario Municipal Board issued a decision that allowed this site to be developed with 3 high-rise towers that contained heights similar to those proposed through this application. This development was put on hold to allow for the City of Ottawa to develop the LRT station on site. Planning Services is of the opinion that the current proposal with 2 towers is a significant improvement from the previous design, and planning is supportive of the high-density development around the LRT station. The property is designated Central Area in Schedule B of the official plan and is identified as being within the Upper Town Character Area in the Central Area Secondary Plan. The proposal adheres to these policies by increasing the supply of inner-city housing with the addition of 2 high-rise apartment buildings with 582 dwelling units. It also introduces at-grade commercial space to contribute to the pedestrian environment. The site is located along the Albert Street Transit Corridor, which was recently subject to a post-LRT repurposing functional design study. And as a result of this study, the applicant has designed the site access to be located outside of a 33-meter emergency bus platform along Albert Street. And it also accommodates a future cycle track on the north side of Albert. The proposal is developed around the Alliant LRT station, illustrated by the red star on the screen. The transit-oriented development guidelines are addressed by replacing a surface parking lot, which is low density and oriented towards users arriving by automobile, with a high-density development that is a mix of uses and supports a range of transportation options. 359 parking spaces are proposed, 130 of which will be for the parking garage use, in other words, rented to people who don't live in the building. 130 spaces is the same amount of parking provided on site today at grade. The remaining 229 spaces will be used for the 588 dwelling units, visitors, and commercial tenants. The proposal provides 520 spaces less than they are permitted to next to a transit station. There are a total of 359 bicycle parking spaces, 9 of which are external to the building for visitors and shoppers. On the screen now is the landscape plan and the proposed zoning schedule. The landscape plan illustrates the building envelope and the 2nd and 10th floor rooftop terraces. There are 2 zones that currently apply to the subject site. Both zones are residential 5th density with a height limit of 64 meters and permit apartment buildings high-rise with limited non-residential uses. The proposed zone retains that R5 designation and adds a parking garage as a permitted use, as well as an exception in the zoning schedule. The schedule permits 2 towers at 81 meters or 27 stories in height, and these towers are required to be separated by a minimum of 15 meters. The exception permits a reduction in landscaped area at grade, permits commercial uses to occupy 100% of the ground floor area, and permits the site to be considered one lot for zoning purposes. This slide illustrates 2 before and after shots. The proposal was subject to the Urban Design Review Panel process and improved the project with an interior connection to the LRT station, an improved facade, and a larger amount of sidewalk space. 7 residents provided feedback with concerns primarily related to the proximity to the abutting condominium development to the west, traffic, and streetscape. The proposal replaces a vehicle-centric, low-density use, a surface parking lot, with a high-density development that has a mix of uses and supports a range of transportation options. The development contributes to the available housing within the central area and connects directly with the LRT, creating street-level activity at grade with commercial uses that serve local residents. As such, the requested zoning bylaw amendment represents good planning, and the department recommends the requested amendments be approved. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And I think what we'll do is we'll go right to our speakers. And I will want to have comment, even though you did touch on it, Anne, on the letter that we got from Linda Hode, who unfortunately can't be here today, but she sent us a good note. And she's speaking, she finds that the 359 space parking garage is excessive and that there's only 9 on-street bicycle parking. So I'm just going to want you to reiterate that. And then the other one we just received, I think this morning or last night, from Matthew Osika, if you didn't see it. And he must live in that condo because he's talking about the lack of sunlight that he has. So we'll work those responses maybe into it, since both of them had wanted to come. But the first speaker up is Jack Davis, who's on the board of CCC 145 Park Square. Welcome, Mr. Davis. Come on forward. Sit in that last chair right there and push the button on the mic. And when it turns red, you're good to go. And as I told Mr. Smith, there's 5 minutes for everybody.
I heard.
Should be interesting, someone trying
I
to
believe this
control him
mic
in the
is still
future.
on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. Just in response to what I just heard, I'm appalled that there was no mention that there's actually 140 units of condominium building on the same site with no mention of it, and that's kind of the feeling of the residents of our building. We're sort of being ignored in the process, in the planning process. I'm Jack Davis. I'm on the condominium board, and I represent the residents of CCC 145.
Can I just interrupt, because where are you then? Because I heard them talking about the condominium. Are you that condominium?
We are that condominium.
Okay.
And
I just thought that maybe I was missing something.
there we are outside on the same block, but outside of the yellow designation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, that didn't take up some of your 5 minutes, just letting you know.
Thank you. The, in the 5 minutes, it will be impossible to substantiate all of my remarks, but we have a hard copy that fleshes out a number of the details that are impossible to speak to at this time. And please, committee, refer to the handout because it does detail a lot of the important points. Simply put, we want what everyone in Ottawa wants, and indeed everyone in the country. We're talking about our capital city, and we're thinking that mediocrity is not good enough. We're literally steps away from the nation's parliament buildings, a legitimate source of national pride, and this is where we live. Literally, this is where we live. We want attractive buildings, and Ms. Harder, I hear you speak of enhancements to the city core and to our city. We want buildings that inspire, setbacks that allow for the comfortable movement of pedestrian traffic. We have a public library that's going down the street, very visible from the Albert Street portion of our block, and increasing the amount of pedestrian traffic that's going to be accumulating there. We want buildings that meet LEED standards for green certification, entranceways that maximize the safety for cyclists and pedestrians. We want visible landscaping. That is, when you're walking by, we want to be able to see the landscaping that has been put in place. Ground level amenities that complement our neighborhood, and an increase in public parking with an exceptional facility for servicing electric vehicles. Specifically, in regards to intensification, the City of Ottawa's official plan asks that intensification and redevelopment must be considered recognizing, quote, moderate increases in density. Going from 64 meters to 81 meters is not moderate. The plan calls for sensitivity regarding height transitions of adjacent buildings. There's no, quote, easy transition, unquote, with the 27-story monster that's being erected beside our 13-story condominium. In terms of setbacks, the reduced setbacks on Albert Street need to be shown to be, quote, reasonable, and to avoid the canyon effect and wind tunnel effects that ensue as a result of the improper placement of buildings. We've gone from 3 to 2, I understand from your presentation this morning, but I don't know how that orients itself in relation to the effect of wind and weather on our situation. In terms of the environment, will the city require Claridge to meet the LEED certification standard? It's healthier, it's more efficient, and we know it's cheaper in the long run. It's an in-your-face indication that the city and Claridge really care about the impact of climate change. The plan needs to provide an easy access for separation of recyclables and organics on every floor. The present plan is an invitation for the residents of the new structure to just throw stuff away into the garbage. The proposed structure totally blocks sunlight, as you've already mentioned, from our south-facing central hall windows, 3-bedroom windows on all 13 floors, and the skylight over our pool. In terms of safety, recent cyclist and pedestrian deaths have surely alerted the city to the need for the utmost vigilance in this regard. Cyclists and pedestrians on Albert Street will have to cross what will be a very busy, dangerous parking entrance that will see many more cars, delivery trucks, and even moving vans. We're not convinced that any site control plan can accommodate this onslaught. In terms of landscaping, our condominium over the last several years has worked very closely and cooperatively with the city to support the Green Street Beautification Project. All of this while the LRT construction was and is taking place right at our
You're going to have to
doorstep.
wrap up, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sure we're going to have a question for you anyway.
As
but-
a not-for-profit organization, we have spent almost $100,000 to meet your and our landscaping goals. Surely, in order to reduce, the move to reduce green space from 30% to 8.9% will
Thank
be
you.
seen by the planning committee for what it is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. I'm sure that we've got questions. Councillor of staff, anyone have any questions of Mr. Davis? No? Councillor Leeper?
Thanks. Just in terms of setbacks, I'm looking at your building, and there's, a brick wall that goes along the street face, and then there are planter boxes. So you've got some sort of perennial shrubs in there, I take it, and a couple
Piper,
of trees.
what street are you talking about here?
I'm looking at your facade on Queen.
Okay.
So a question that I struggle with is the face of your building on Queen is an interruption in the street fabric. It's not necessarily safe feeling, it's just a blank brick wall. Is this what you're proposing this building should have, or how would you see the setbacks done differently in order to satisfy the concerns that you have?
I don't believe we have blank brick walls on Queen Street, so I'm confused as to the nature of your question.
I'm looking at I'm presuming, sir? Yeah. It's a wall, it's, 5 feet high, 4 feet high? I'm looking at,
Can you help me, Catherine? I'm not sure what.
okay.
Take a look at that picture up there. Queen Street has got balconies all the way up.
It's got balconies, but at the ground floor, there's no activation at all, right? I'm trying to understand what you would prefer to see by way of activating the street front. How could this building be improved with setbacks, with landscaping, with activation compared to what they're proposing, when your building on Queen is sort of a blank spot in the street fabric?
I invite Evelyn Wojnarowski, a member of this committee, to address your question.
That's not the way we work here.
Sorry.
You're not signed up as a delegation. I'm going to have, we do have rules, so I'm just going to say, would the rest of the committee be willing to allow, what's your name again?
Evelyn
Evelyn to speak? And Evelyn, you have a last name?
Wojnarowski.
Okay, so it's up to the committee. We have to make that exception? Yeah. Okay, so you go forward. Mr. Davis, I think you can take a seat now because I think the other questions are for staff. So answer that question. What was the question again that you?
Just, I'll make it easier. What would you like the setbacks to be in order to improve the streetscape?
Well, for purposes of looks, for example, where Queen Street is supposed to be the beautiful street of Ottawa after all the investments that the city has made, we're looking at a building that will have a setback way forward our building. You're saying that it's a brick wall. It's not a brick wall. It's the building and about 6 meters of landscaping in front of us. Now so you're going to lose that line of sight in that street by having a building that's 6 meters, like way beyond where our property lines end. And on top of that, we're trying to maintain a visual, the visual prominence of LRT in that corner.
They're saying that they've done all this.
So for all intents and purposes, the protocol is that the LRT station should be quite visible from the street.
Right.
If you have a building that's going to be protruding, beyond our building and then slightly covering the LRT, that's exactly not, from a very unprofessional point of view,
No.
I should say. And we have the same concerns about Albert Street. They're going to be going well beyond the property lines of our building. Our building is not built exactly, our wall, I should say, is not built on the property line. We have landscaping, again, that extends to about 6 meters there. And as you can see from the drawing, it's well past beyond that, and we're depriving pedestrians of all kinds of space in that area too.
Okay. So it's, you just want the building brought back by, several meters.
For all kinds of reasons, for aesthetic reasons, for safety reasons, for transportation reasons, for traffic. We're going to have a lot of traffic in that area with the LRT, with the rerouting of the buses. And, we'll have 2 major bus stations on Alliance Street,
Yep.
and 1 bus station on Queen and 1 on Bay, immediately across the street from us on Albert Street and Bay. So it's going to be a major hub, and it's going to be a major intensity project there with I don't know how many residents eventually. So, just for that reason.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. That's it. You can take your seat again. Thank you very much. And we do have your name because you sent us an email asking for Mr. Davis to be signed up, so that's great. Okay, so next up is the applicant, but before we go to the applicant. Okay, so we'll wait on that because I think that it will tie into the applicant. Now, we've got 4 different people signed up, so how much, Miguel Tremblay? Are you coming up, Miguel? Who's coming up? Everybody's coming up? Neil's coming up, Neil Malhotra? You just tell me when you get here, who's here. I only have 4 people listed. No, I have 5. Miguel, are you doing a presentation?
Yeah, I'm Jamie Posen, Senior Planner with FOTEN.
Okay.
And maybe I'll begin, I guess just as, I was making some notes there, but just to make kind of a general statement maybe about the history of this project. So as was mentioned, there is previously, prior to 2011, there was as-of-right zoning on the property. It's R5. The height limit allows for 64 meters. And in 2011, there was approval through the Ontario Municipal Board that allowed for a particular design that included 3 towers, 2 of which were at 81 meters each. Since that time and through the construction of the LRT, Claridge has revisited the design, and they've actually made some significant improvements to the design, which now includes only 2 towers instead of 3, and what we believe, and it sounds like staff agree, is a much better design for this site and for the surroundings. So with regards to the zoning bylaw before the committee today, the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is really to accomplish a couple of things. One is to enshrine those variances with a couple of very minor tweaks. One being, for example, the setback because of the location of the LRT where it was constructed. Two being addition of the parking garage, and three to reconfigure the density on the site such that it's actually a lower density than was originally approved and what they have as of right permissions for. And this lower density results in a better design that would be enshrined through the height schedule that's in front of the committee. So with those general comments, I mean, we are available to respond to any particular issues. Do we want to be specific on these? Happy to respond to questions.
So everybody's here, everyone else is here to respond to questions?
That's right.
Okay, so the first questions we have are from the area councillor, Catherine McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming out. My first question is on affordable housing. I just wanted to clarify with you what your plans and goals are for affordability on the site.
Claridge has received approval from CMHC to submit the, I guess I'll call it the South Tower, into the rental financing initiative program, which is an affordable program targeted on bringing new rental streams into Canada's tightest rental markets. So in that program, we'll be putting in approximately about 320 units. The criteria of the program essentially is twofold. The first is it's targeted at the 50th income percentile, ensuring rents are, a percentage of the units have rents that are affordable to 30% of the 50th percentile in that target market. There's a second measure which requires the property to collect essentially 10% less than the potential rent it could achieve in the marketplace. In that criteria, so in that program, we would be, in a project of 320 units, we would need to supply approximately 75 units that met the first criteria, and then another 61 units that would be 70% of the first criteria. They don't make it simple, it's the federal government. So in the case of this particular project, actually all 320 units would meet the first criteria of the project, and then approximately 180 units will meet the second criteria. I guess a couple other items we can address sort of in that program. There's also social outcomes are a critical factor of that program. So I think there was a question regarding whether we were doing LEED. We don't do LEED for a variety of reasons. Mostly it's bureaucratic. But as part of that part of the program with CMHC, we're required to do 15% improvement over the 2015 energy code, which is about a 10-15% improvement to the code that was 5 years previous to that. This project has been tested, will come out at about 27% above the energy code and about 35% carbon cut compared to model buildings in today's code. There's other issues, other items regarding accessibility, proximity to transit, other critical items that allow a project to be eligible to this program.
Councillor McKinney, because of the conversation we had yesterday, after our conversation, I actually had a meeting out at Ben Franklin Place with Syed was there, and people who are working hard at our transit-oriented development and looking for opportunities for affordable housing as a directive from the mayor. So I asked him to come today in case we got into this. So
actually, I have a question,
you have a question for him
on what we've just heard.
Okay, then
Yeah,
make
perfect.
that question. I just wanted to give the
Yeah,
the
no,
detail why
I
was here.
appreciate that, thank you. So we know that, deep affordability is, actually the 30th and 20th percentile. The 50th is not deeply affordable, certainly. But can you just explain, in terms of average market rent, what the 50th percentile means, Saeed? Is that? Just so that I just want to be clear about what we're talking about here in terms of affordability. I get that it's the CMHC's rental initiative, private rental initiative, but I just want to make it clear that we're not talking about deep affordability, right? Am I correct?
Yep. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, to answer the question, so CMHC's program is based on the median income percentiles for the City of Ottawa. So the median income percentile for Ottawa right now is at, the median income percentile is about 105,000. Now, the rents that I think Mr. Malhotra is talking about would be around between 1,600 and 1,355 a month.
I would say between 15 and 2 in this program, yeah.
Okay.
Because you're also, the other constraint, there's the income constraint, but there's also the constraint of the 10% below potential rents, which is in this marketplace is actually the bigger constraint.
Okay.
I just want to understand.
Sure.
I just want for us all to understand what the 50th percentile means.
That's right. So in the official plan, we talk about the 30th income percentile for renters and to the 40th for homeowners for affordable home ownership. And so this is about, I recall it's about just under $75,000 at the 30th income percentile, it's $57,000 for the 30th income percentile right now. So, and that works out to a rent of between $1,400 and $1,500 a month, depending on how what you include in that rent, whether there's utilities and other monthly carrying costs that you'd incorporate into that.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. So if a family earning $57,000 a year,
we say should be able to afford between $1,400 to $1,500 a month in rent. Now, that's the official plan requirement for affordable housing on the rental side. With respect to housing services and the programs that we provide under Action Ottawa and other affordable housing programs, we tend to use the average market rent and percentages of that. So a one-bedroom unit right now goes for $1,088, and 80% of that would be, $800 and some dollars, for example, or less. So we're dealing with two different sets of affordability requirements. So the affordability under CMHC would be what we will call middle market, rents for typical households or lower to median income households in the city of Ottawa. And then when we talk about the deeper affordability, we're really talking about subsidized housing at the average market rent or less.
Okay. And then 180 units, I'm just flipping back to you, so just so I'm clear, 180 units would be priced at 10% below average market rent citywide?
No, so the whole entire building as a whole would be priced 10% below potential market rents, which are very different than AMRs. So if I was building this as full private market project, what could I charge? I can't charge that much.
Okay.
So that affects the entirety of the building. The 180 units are meeting, we come back to that definition, 30% of the 50th percentile. You take that number and multiply it by 70%. That is 180 units are meeting that criteria.
Okay. And you've received approval?
Yeah, so we have received approval. The formal agreement hasn't been entered yet, but yes.
Okay. I have questions of staff. Do we want to let councillors finish here?
I think that you might as well while they're here. I know Councillor Bernard has some questions. Maybe somebody else will have a follow-up question, but, we're also looking for questions on actually what it is, right? Not just, it's not Community and Protective Services Committee, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so
to staff, it's the planning staff.
Yep,
Yeah.
and that's fine, but I'm just saying, let's leave them there because there could be some other, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't know what,
So
and Rick wants to speak.
I just want to get back to the setbacks that were the concerns of 151 Bay, which is the neighboring condominium, which actually does have incredible streetscapes. And I wonder why we did, as staff, allow for less setbacks on Albert and Queen, even though an earlier OMB decision had required greater setbacks.
Certainly, thank you for the question. Madam Chair, it should be important to note here that there are actually 2 road widenings and 3 pedestrian easements that we're taking through the site plan control process that's associated with this rezoning. So on Albert, the city is appropriating 1.25 meters that's going to be dedicated toward city land, and 0.9 meters along Lyon. And then further to that, beyond that distance, there are pedestrian easements. So there's 0.25 along Albert, 1.25 along Lyon, and 2.5 along Queen. So to look at the zoning schedule, I don't know, it's not working, but you can see that there's a setback, just to take Queen as an example, you can see that it goes 2.5 meters, and then it kind of jogs up to 1.1 meters, and that's a result of the LRT station is actually built 1.1 meters, and the building just builds on top of it, which is what our real estate department actually desired for protection of the LRT spot. But that 2.5 meters is a pedestrian easement. So that'll be protected for pedestrians wandering around the downtown, and those hatch lines along Queen and along Albert are road widenings. So it does seem like we're taking a less of a setback along those two streets, but if you count in the road widening, it's actually equivalent to what was approved at the OMB.
And that's city-owned, that's publicly owned, okay. Just another question around on-street bike parking. Is that something that we can work through in site plan?
Yes, certainly. The site plan, of course, is not solidified yet. Just to address Ms. Hode's comments, she did mention that there's 9 bicycle parking spaces. Maybe this is I'm partially at fault, maybe because I didn't elaborate in my report, but there is actually also 350 bicycle parking spaces inside. So the 9 spaces are there to help any visitors that don't want to park their bikes inside with their friends or families' spaces, or shoppers to whoever tenant comes in for the
Sure, but just given that we're on top of a light rail station, I'm assuming that a lot of the visitors will be coming via our new train, and they can actually bring bikes with them and be able to move around in the downtown once they're here. So certainly to have more bike parking always encourages alternate modes of transportation.
We can certainly look at it further through site plan. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
And how many bike parking do you have inside?
350.
And is there room to add any inside? Is that all assigned for the people that will be?
Well, I will say that
I would think so. It would be for the residents, right? Because you wouldn't want to have people having access necessarily to garages that are.
There is in the design, there's a level on the first floor that I think is meant to be a little bit more flexible. On the P1 floor, that's some flexibility. We can work, I'm happy to work with the city. I mean, what we're dealing with here, we're not just dealing with the LRT, but then we're also dealing with 3 bus stations around the LRT station. And that's become more the constraint of what you're putting in terms of sidewalk furniture than, what we're doing. Like there's a lot of restrictions that put onto us in advance of the design.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, Councillor Bernard, then Councillor Shirelli.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to comment on this at all. I wasn't here today. I was just listening to Bill 108, but this came up, and with regard to the rental construction financing piece, I just want to come back to that because I actually helped to implement this program while I was at FCM. I know Tim knows about the program as well, but I helped to implement it there. And the program speaks to a median income and meeting a 30th percentile. I don't know where 50 has come from, but the eligibility criteria has always been 30% of income.
That's not correct.
The standard.
If somebody wants to pull up the CMHC website.
So if I could just finish, Mr. Malhotra. I'll read the website if you need me to, but it is a 30%
Again, this isn't about affordable housing.
The reason this is so important.
Okay? This isn't about affordable housing.
Yeah, well, the reason this is important, Madam Chair.
But we're not going to be reading statements from a website. So let's ask your questions, please.
Sure. The reason this is so important is because this is transit-oriented development. It's going near transit. And we've talked about affordability as a key component of these types of developments. And so I don't want to say that we're just going to get away with saying there's going to be affordability here because you have the potential to have a project agreement with the federal government. What I want to know is, do you have a project agreement in place right now with the federal government for this program?
The formal document's under negotiation right now.
It's a formal document under negotiation. Okay, so it's not in place yet.
Nope.
And sorry, did you have a comment, Councillor Blais?
Before, you sound like you're getting really angry, Councillor Menard, and I
I'm just trying to
actually would like to
understand-
bring it back to what we're here to talk about today.
Sure, I'm trying to understand, there's been comments made, Madam Chair.
What we're talking about is this application, and how the affordable housing part came up is the question that came from the local councillor, who raises it at every application, quite frankly. And she will at every other one that comes along too. This is not a meeting to discuss that, and you're free to have that greater discussion at Community Protective Services Committee. I'm sure that Councillor Sudds would be interested in that.
So I'm just going to finish, if I can, Chair. The reason why this is important is because sometimes these applications hinge on things like affordability. And so I want to make sure that we've got it right, that it's not going to come back and say, actually, we don't have a project agreement with them at the end of the day. And because I helped implement this program, I know about the eligibility criteria and the most recent 2019 program that exists out there. So I just want to be clear on what it is. It's a low-interest loan to the company. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and it's a 10-year commitment.
No, so the affordability commitments are actually 20 years. The loan commitment from the government's 10.
The loan commitment is a 10-year commitment. And there are other social outcomes that we're trying to meet here, energy efficiency requirements as well.
Absolutely.
And then the accessibility requirements.
Yep.
Those are the three pieces: the affordability, the accessibility, and the energy efficiency. And so I I think it's important that if we're going to approve applications, we should have project agreements in hand if we're talking about affordability in these types of buildings and how important it is to the city going forward. So I hear you that you're working with the federal government on this, and that there could be affordable housing, but there's no guarantee of that in this project at this point. Can we just get clarification? There's no guarantee of affordable housing in the project.
Well, let's ask Mr. Syed, actually.
Absolutely.
But then we're wrapping it up on affordable housing, because I'm going to questions that, Councillor Shirley, are you on affordable housing, or do you want to speak to actually the application? That's great, thanks. So, Mr. Syed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the guarantee of affordable housing, I don't think there is a guarantee unless we can see and confirm an agreement with CMHC under the Rental Construction Financing Initiative.
Sir. Okay, Councillor Shirley.
Yeah. So to staff, is there an idea, this is a question from the 90s practically, is there an idea of what's going to happen to all the vehicles that use the parking lot right now?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Right now, the parking, it's a majority surface parking lot, and there are approximately 130 spaces there now. And through this rezoning, one of the asks is to add a parking garage use to the zone, and that allows the owner to rent spaces to people who don't live there. And my understanding from talking to the applicant is that they anticipate to rent about the equivalent amount, so 130 spaces underground.
I'll just add something, I guess, anecdotal to that. Most of the parking lot has been out of commission for a few years during the construction of the LRT station, about half of it, I would say. I don't know if I have an exact number, but I would guess the half of the remaining lot has been LRT labor. So it's dissipated into the marketplace anyways, because the LRT kind of took over a good chunk of the station.
Well, and that's why we actually hung on to it, because of that purpose of the LRT staging.
Yes.
Years ago, right? Remember, that's why you're asking, right? Okay. Anyone else have questions, or no? Okay, so, all right. Anyways, thank you, everybody. So on the application, carried. Thank you very much. And, now that we've passed it, I just want to say that I'm very excited, because when we open the Confederation line, the more we can populate the areas where people will be using this. I mean, we've lost, well, we haven't started on the LeBreton piece that we were really counting on, so I'm pleased about this. But thank you. So now we're going to go to our added item, which is Bill 108. So Mr. Willis? So Sean, you're here on Bill 108, and we have questions on Bill 108. Okay. So the floor is yours, Mr. Willis. You want to go to questions? You want to introduce the work that your staff have done? how would you like to proceed?
So Chair, with your indulgence, I'll just make some really quick introductory remarks, and then I welcome comments and questions from committee. I want to introduce Mr. Garrett Schramm from our Legal Services Group. I'm not sure all of the members...
Can you speak louder, please?
Sorry. I'd like to introduce Mr. Garrett Schramm from our Legal Services Group. He works with Mr. Mark. He's recently joined the city. I'm not sure all members of committee have met him yet. You will see him involved in planning application files with the rest of the legal services team. He's worked directly with me in the development of this response to the province, as have staff from other parts of the department and other departments to provide input into it. So at this stage, just before what's before you today is briefly the report from the city's clerk and solicitor and myself to introduce the response to the province, which is comprised of two parts. The first is a letter to the minister, which outlines, we decided to try to capture the biggest concerns of the city in the overview letter, and ultimately council will decide if this is the right content or not with your advice today. And secondly, we had a walk through the legislation table attached where we indicated sort of our sense of the impact of the change in the legislation and the recommended city position. So we broke down each section of the legislation for you in that. So we have both of those documents here today. We do not have a formal presentation, but if there are questions or comments, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions? Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is just around the city's appearance before the province at the upcoming discussions. Are we going to be appearing? Do we have delegations going? I know Councillor Leeper is potentially going, but do we have other city staff going as well?
So, Mr. Vice Chair, in the council report recommending, we're asking council's authority to send a delegation to a standing committee of the legislature should the province actually hold that. We're not 100% sure they will, but should they hold it, we through this report seek authority. The recommendation is that it be the chair of planning committee, the chair of ARAC, because they also have a planning component of responsibility, with support from legal services and myself, should the delegation go forward to represent the city's commission
position.
I think
that's very important, Madam Chair. Thanks very much.
Thank you. That's why the importance of having it here today, right? And our follow-up, because it's, I'd like to also say to the staff that have done work to this degree, this quickly, on such a complex issue, has been great too. Councillor Leeper?
Thanks, Chair. And thank you very much for this document. I'm not going to run through everything I like, because I like a lot of it. I think staff have done a great job of addressing the shortfalls in what I think is a piece of very poorly thought through legislation. There are a couple of areas, though, where I'm going to be looking for some further color. The key one for me is Section 37. I think, Mr. Willis, you probably saw the op-ed that I published in the paper recently. Staff doesn't seem to be addressing the elimination of Section 37 in this letter. What is staff's position? If it were up to me, we'd be addressing it very forcefully. But what is staff's thinking in focusing on Development Charge Act changes and cash in lieu changes, and not Section 37?
So, Chair, that's a very difficult question for us to answer, and certainly at the end of the day, council's will prevail on whatever goes in this letter. But the position staff took to this is that there have been criticisms of Section 37 from the day we started using it in Ottawa about the lack of process transparency, the lack of clarity on how you calculate values, the lack of clarity on how you decide which benefits are appropriate. In some ways, on the one hand, the new legislation offers a very transparent, very clear process about how community benefits would be determined and applied to a project. So in one sense, I actually think there's some benefits to what they're proposing. We do not like that in doing so, they're attacking so many other areas that we think have benefit in the city. So if we were to have a community benefits charge and still had parkland dedication and cash in lieu, that might actually be better system than we have today. That's why staff didn't feel it was, based on our experience so far, that there really necessarily would be a council consensus on the path forward. That being said, if it's council's will that we add that to a concern, we will do so.
So you know my argument around Section 37, which is that, in fact, it has done, I think, a great deal of good in the city. I've spoken about, the very nimble way in which I can respect the intention of Section 37. I understand absolutely it can only be spent on capital. I absolutely understand the OMB's insistence on the geographic nexus between the benefit and the intensification that it's intended to mitigate. I don't like the notion of simply throwing some unspecified amount of money into a very tightly defined parameter program that eliminates the potential to put new water infrastructure into a public square so we can flood a rink, put money into an affordable housing fund, do the things very nimbly at the local level that help to mitigate the worst effects of intensification. I can't help but think that the Section 30 or the Community Benefit Fund is going to see the city collect less money. It's going to centralize decision-making. It's going to have a list of fewer eligible projects. And, I would look for the concurrence of my colleagues on Planning Committee to ask you to address that more forcefully in this letter, to outline the concerns that the city has, that I have, with the loss of Section 37.
Chair, I would reiterate that if that's committee's will, we are quite prepared to do so. As I said, this is a double-edged sword on this particular issue. One comment I failed to make, which I should have made, is one of the parts that's not explicit in the legislation, but it is there, is the underlying ability of the province to force us to deal with discrepancies between the official plan and the zoning bylaws. So they, in doing so, may eliminate our ability to even use a Section 37 should they do that. So I think that was one of the considerations we had in mind, is if they go ahead and say, if the intention is you upzone in and around transit stations, for example, and you're required to have your zoning in conformity with your zoning bylaw, with your official plan right away, we won't even be able to use Section 37 in that instance. So it's sort of a double edge on that one. But again, we will take committee's will on that.
I absolutely understand that, and it's legitimate. I like the way the City of Ottawa has been treating zoning and Section 37 to this point. We've been holding off upzoning in areas where we know that secondary plans contemplate upzoning, but it is going to be quite a while before we have everything properly upzoned to what we actually anticipate heights are going to be. And in the meantime, the Section 37 section of the Planning Act has made a measurable difference in the quality of life of the residents who live in the most rapidly intensifying areas. And I don't know how to proceed with asking you to do more of that with my, do I need to move something, or?
Well, perhaps at this point, because it is coming to council on June the 12th, is it? And, a direction maybe for them to give some more thought to it and come back would be good.
So will you take direction on that?
Madam Chair,
because we actually have 3 weeks. Yes?
Madam Chair, we've prepared a motion that would essentially require or suggest that council, the committee provide comments to staff to prepare a memorandum which could be considered by council that would take suggestions such as Councillor Leaper's, incorporate them into the memo.
Vice Chair Tierney has that.
Okay,
excellent.
Perfect.
But your direction is
you've heard my concerns, and
well received.
Yeah, if others agree, great, they'll weigh in. Obviously, I think staff have taken the appropriate direction in not objecting to the resurrection of de novo hearings, but I do want to make sure that it's on the record of this committee that I and colleagues absolutely object to the return of de novo hearings. I think that the government has very deliberately removed the deference that the previous government was giving to locally elected officials. I also understand I brought that motion to council in the last term. It failed, and so I get that you don't think that there's going to be consensus if we try to push back at that. But going back to de novo hearings simply introduces a whole new level of time and expense, particularly to community members, and it is an inappropriate clawback of input by the province into local planning matters. So I do want to make sure that's on the radar. The city has not commented on timelines. I I think that there is a fairly significant reduction in the timelines to approval that have been proposed in 108. The city has no comments. How come we don't have any comments on those?
Chair, I think we genuinely were trying to focus on what are the comments we can offer that the government would be most likely to affect change in the legislation. And I'll tell you on a practical level, on a day-to-day, there are certain applications that come through today and we don't meet timelines because there are technical issues that come up, engineering issues, community consultation issues, the like. And it's very rare in the city of Ottawa right now that anyone appeals us for lack of decision on the timeline. And frankly, any developer who chooses to do so gets in a very long line at the local planning appeals tribunal in order to get a decision out of them, and they'd be far better served to work with us to get through council's decision. So I don't believe it's in anyone's advantage to appeal on a shorter timeline right now, and I think that we can survive that change from the government and put our effort into asking for changes in other areas.
And then lastly, with the chair's indulgence, there are several components to the document. There's the draft letter, and then we have the very specific comments in behind. There's a bullet list in the main letter. Below are Ottawa's main concerns. You haven't included the changes to the inclusionary zoning regime. The Bill 108 proposes limiting inclusionary zoning to areas around transit. The city has made mention in the detailed portion that we would prefer to have the flexibility to implement inclusionary zoning wherever we think it would do the most good. Can you highlight that in the main letter, include it in that bullet list?
Chair, just clarify one quick thing. First of all, yes, we absolutely can add that to the main letter. I'm very comfortable to reiterate that comment in it. One of the things the legislation allows, it does allow us to apply inclusionary zoning in areas not around transit stations, but we have to accept the development permit rule, and it has to go through an approval of the minister. Yep. So our approach within the letter is saying, okay, that's, if we have to do it, we'll go there, but we would prefer they actually simplified it for us or be open-minded. But we would, based on our initial analysis of where we would have to apply inclusionary zoning right now, it tends to cluster in the areas of transit stations to begin with. So yep. I think our approach was we'll start there, and if we want to go further, council will ask the ministry for the appropriate approvals later on to go further. We just would rather not it be tied to development permit system.
Absolutely, agreed 100%. I just would like to make that clearer in our letter that we have concerns around that. You know what? Those are the main concerns that I have around this. Again, no, I think the work that's gone in here in the detail, particularly, is extremely good work. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, Mr. Willis, is around the park, the building of the parks. It seems that that's one area of this bill that it's not clear what we're going to do with it. Now, under the work of the chair on building better suburbs in the last term of council, one of the things we did was we heard from people around the city that it was an issue that in new developments, parks were sometimes 10 years behind the people moving into their houses. And so we worked with the sponsor group and advanced the building of the parks to before people move into the homes by having the developers build them themselves to the city standards, and then the city comes in and inspects afterwards to make sure those standards are achieved. But we've had very good results with that. And so when I first read this legislation, I thought maybe they were applying that across the province, that building the parks would still be, the city would set the standard and follow it up, but now the full responsibility would be the developer.
Chair, as we review the legislation, and it may be one of those things that we won't know until we see the regulations, we don't see the province reflecting the good work we've been doing in that area. As a matter of fact, we see a jeopardy to the development of parks citywide, whether it be suburban or urban, and also community centers and community facilities. For example, under this model, I cannot imagine the Richcraft Center being built under this model. We would not be able to do what we did in that version. I could not imagine some of the park development, more elaborate programs. I can't imagine Millennium Park necessarily coming forward the way it's being built. So I would wish to be wrong about that, and when I saw the regulations, but I think that that's why we highlighted this as one of the most significant issues that this council would have, because it applies to every single ward, every single community throughout the city.
I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if maybe we should send a copy of the Building Better Suburbs report to the minister for comments on Bill 108. That, exactly what Mr. Willis just said. We did a lot of advancements with that project that you and I and Councillor Blais have seen it in our suburban wards especially, the difference that has made to get these parks built up front has been a big improvement. And clarification around that, because as Mr. Willis says, I can't believe that any government would be proposing stop building parks. I can't see the rationale for that at all here. So I think we have to get clarification and perhaps take this opportunity to put a suggestion forward that we're getting very good results with. Fair?
Absolutely, and we spent about 5 years on that too, and it has made a difference in, valuing the land more, using it better, those basic concepts, and having people bringing people back to shared space. I think that that's very worthwhile. It probably would be best to go through the ministry staff, I would think, to have that before them. And as Mr. Willis said, he's looking for a meeting, and that's something for sure we will include.
So you'd rather the letter come from Mr. Willis, but send the report?
Yeah, I think that let's face it, if you go to any minister, I mean, they have a chief of staff, it goes down to the people, he has the contacts that he's working with at his level, it just gets it where you want it to go faster, and then he can have that conversation, and then we take it politically.
Chair, as I agree with the chair's position on this, that we can absolutely provide this to ministry staff as part of the backup to our comments, and should part of the report recommends that we ask the minister for a meeting with much the same group, even if we don't get the chance to debut before the legislature, and we can absolutely bring that to that meeting as well.
Madam Chair, I'm just thinking, and I'll wrap up here, the other part of what we did was to deal with the stormwater management, and there was significant savings for the city as well as towards the cost of development with the changes we put in there. So it's more than just putting in play structures in a park. It's a whole use of the public piece. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. If you have anything more, to contribute or whatever, we do have a motion. Did you want to say something else, Mr. Willis?
No, Chair, just from a process perspective to advise you. So we're looking for committee to adopt the staff recommendations. The 4 parts is to receive the letter, allow the mayor to sign this letter should council agree, along with the table, ask for a chance to depute in front of the standing committee should there be the opportunity, ask for a delegation to meet with the minister if possible as well. So that's the elements of the recommendation.
Okay, so Vice Chair Tierney does have a motion, just makes it more complete, I think. Your direction will be...
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Therefore, it be resolved that staff be directed to review the comments and additional proposed amendments of document 1 and 2 made by Planning Committee members at the meeting on May 23rd, 2019, and that the staff advise Council by way of memorandum prior to the June 12th Council meeting on the implications of each, if any, and prepare a revised document 1 and 2 for Council's consideration and recommendations and endorsement.
You don't like the motion? No. Is the question on the motion?
It is on the motion.
Okay, who do you want to ask it to?
So with respect to the motion, can I just ask for a quick recap? What have you heard by way of the comments and additional proposed amendments to documents 1 and 2 today, just to make sure that the feedback was captured?
So just quickly, just the recap. So for the main letter and the table, we've been asked to toughen the language on Section 37, the current version of Section 37. We've been asked to relay the comments from the table into the main letter about the inclusionary zoning. We have, I don't believe we received, I believe the committee was satisfied with my response on timelines. We do acknowledge that in the the impracticality of the timelines in the table, but we're not making that one of the top issues Ottawa's trying to get changes in the legislation to. And then some advice from Councillor Hubley that in the meetings and at a staff-to-staff level, province to city staff, we can convey some of the BBSS background information to show how much progress we've actually made on our own.
Okay. So on that motion, moved by Vice Chair Tierney, carried? Thank you. And then on the main recommendation as amended? Okay, thank you. I think that's it. Our next meeting will be on, so we're adjourned, there's no other business. Any inquiries? Let's be formal here. Any inquiries? Notices of motion? Other business? Okay, we're adjourned and we'll be back here on Thursday, June the 13th. It almost feels like a holiday, eh? It's like 3 weeks. Well, you're getting a big break because after the 27th, we're not having another planning meeting until, wait for it, the end of August, because your chair looked at the schedule and said, you know what, like council last meeting is July the 10th, we're scheduled to meet July 11th. So July 11th, none of that would go to council until the end of August, and we have a planning meeting before that, the week before that last council meeting in August, so bonus. I know. Oh yeah, yes. It'll be big. Anyway, thanks everyone.